The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jamie Reed, the Education Manager with the Oracle Applications and Technology Users Group. I'm really excited to have you join us for today's webinar, Your Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Part 2, hosted by ERP Risk Advisors. And we also have Creole joining them today. For those who might be new to our community, OATUG is a network of Oracle users and partners dedicated to providing education and networking to our members. Please visit our OATUG calendar of events for the latest webinars and be sure to save the date for our upcoming education week. All participants will be on mute throughout the webinar. Please send questions to the questions box. Today's session is being recorded and members will have access to the recording and the slide deck in the knowledge base within 48 hours. Now I want to welcome our speakers, Jeff Hare, CEO of ERP Risk Advisors, Tom Simkus, Senior Director, Commercial SLED with Creole, and Lee Briggs, Director of ERP Applications with Creole. Thank you so much, guys. You can take it away.
Okay. Jeff, I'll kick it off. So we've got introductions. It says TBD. I thought that was going to get fixed, but whatever. We're going to do introductions first. Jeff, do you want to go? And then
all right.
I can go.
I guess we didn't really rehearse who was going to sing "Bridge Over Troubled Water." So I don't know. Is that you, Tom, or is that you, Lee?
I might jump in later.
Okay, got it. All right, welcome everybody. Jeff Hare, CEO and founder of ERP Risk Advisors. Have been in this space for going on 28 years. Implemented EBS as a client, and we do a lot of work in and around security controls for Oracle applications and a bunch of other systems above and beyond just Oracle. So looking forward to the discussion.
All right, so we have three presenters today. Obviously, Jeff is going to play the moderator, and I'm sure she'll chime in as well. I've got myself. My name is Tom Simkus. I'm a senior director here with Creole Consulting, a wholly owned subsidiary of SMX. As was stated earlier, I run the commercial and SLED practice, state, local education. Been doing Oracle for quite a long time. I'm an Oracle ace, and with that, I will introduce my compatriot, Lee Briggs.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're viewing us from. My name is Lee Briggs. I work with Tom at Creole. I've worked with Oracle and with Tom, in fact, for about 25 years. Started off on EBS, started off on 11i, did release 12, did cloud, and since 2013, I've been exclusive on cloud. I am an Oracle ace. It is an award given out by Oracle. You can't pay for it. You can't buy it. You can't study for it. Literally, you have to be nominated by someone to show that you share your knowledge with the community. You've got the expertise out there that you actually know what you're talking about. So I got my aceness in 2016, I think. Tom got his in 2017. I'm really excited to be here, talking with Jeff and talking with everyone. Let's go ahead. And I'm going to drop off camera.
All right, thank you, Lee. So in part one of this series, we talked about some critical factors that contribute to implementation success, right, or failure. And a lot of that was, in preparation for the implementation. What we plan on discussing on this one is what needs to go right during the implementation, how to plan to ensure that it does. And we have some specific examples. Data conversion training requirements, those are the major things, but we certainly plan to touch on a lot of different things. And what we want folks to get out of this is understand the main drivers of success, how to define them, how to measure them. That is an old trope, but it's a true statement. If you can't measure something, it is really hard to hold yourself accountable for it. That we want to talk about how to prepare your team for the inevitable change that's coming, not only from a process perspective, but also from systems. And then finally, understand how to focus on small wins to get to the end point. We do a lot of different projects, big bang, phased implementations, agile implementations, waterfall, and there are benefits and negatives to all of them. But no matter which type of project you're undergoing, you definitely want to focus on getting things done and getting some victories. It certainly helps keep the process moving forward. And it also helps people feel good about what they're doing and what they're engaged with. At any time during this, by the way, we're a little different. We do these sessions. If you have a question and you want us to try to address it during the session, we're happy to do that. You don't have to hold all of your questions till the end. A little bit about SMX and Creel. So as I said, Creel is a wholly owned subsidiary of SMX. Oracle is in our DNA. Our name is an anagram for Oracle, in fact. And once you see it, you will never be able to forget it. We were founded in 2005. We are a member of the Oracle Partner Network, and we're an authorized reseller and a certified implementer. We have well over 40 public sector implementations. If you count the number of implementations that we've actually done in the commercial space, as well as public sector, it's well over 200. Lee and I have been doing this for a long time. Both Lee and I were on the first cloud implementation in North America that was cloud ERP, cloud HCM, and payroll. And we like to say we got a proprietary toolkit, which includes best practice flows and Jira accelerators to help expedite return on investment. So we've certainly do this a long time. I'd love to tell you I don't have any unhappy customers, but we don't have a lot of them. But anybody that tells you they don't have any unhappy customers is either not been doing this very long or is a fibber. There generally is not an option C. Talk about ERP risk advisors. Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, ERP Risk Advisors, traditionally a risk advisory firm, kind of competing with the Big Four in around SOX compliance, and the advent of the SaaS applications. We're also focusing on cybersecurity risks, and license cost is certainly an issue that comes into play with role design and implementations. We recently, in the last year, developed our own software to do security and controls assessments. So that's new to our organization, and we do that not just for Oracle products, but for Workday and kind of the gamut of what you'd expect to be adjunct to either Oracle or a standalone application. So we're pretty excited about that as an organization to be able to deliver assessments without having to rely upon other people's software. In the Fusion Cloud space, we do a lot of net new implementation of roles or security and controls overall. That does include what we call fully customized roles, trying to inoculate those roles from updates that happen on a quarterly basis, and helping management manage risk associated with the quarterly patch process, and then in conjunction with organizations like SMXs are implementing to be able to implement least privileged and SOD-free type roles or addressing SOD risks. So we're pretty unique in our ability to deliver security controls requirements. We can implement Risk Management Cloud if that's something you guys have licensed. It's a great tool. If you haven't licensed, we can kind of use other solutions, including our assessments on a one-time or periodic basis, pre-implementation, post-implementation, to be able to manage risk. So good team. We have a center of excellence in that area. We've got a team that's 3 full-time people that it's all they do is implement custom roles for ERP Cloud or Fusion Cloud. And we've got it very structured, and we can really effectively give you what we would call more of a firm fixed budget to be able to do that. And in that respect, I think we're one of only probably 5 or 6 firms in the world that can do that effectively. And we do serve as a back office support team or a strategic partner support team for companies like SMX and others that are implementing, whether it's government or commercial entities. All right, on to the big stuff.
All right. So by the way, just as a side note, and it's super important, one of the things that is often ignored during these implementations is roles and access. And as Jeff said, he's one of the best in the business at doing it. So as you're going through your journey to the cloud, a lot of firms, myself included, by the way, just so I'm as guilty of this as anybody else, I try to stay away from custom roles as much as possible. I certainly do them periodically, but if you have a need for custom roles or segregation duties, really, Jeff's firm is probably the best in the business, and certainly somebody you should consider using. So,
yeah, if I can just make one more comment on that, Tom, because I think it's what's interesting.
Show, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is we just got back from Workday Rising, for example, the dirty word of not a Oracle, right? We can do projects in other spaces, and kind of the lack of custom role design or lack of focus on security controls is really pretty consistent across most ERP systems. So it is kind of the way the world works. in that, the primary goal and objective for an SI is to bid a contract to get on time, on budget with intended functionality. And so it's something that you just need to think about in the context of if and when you're going to do as part of the project. And we would argue that it should be done as part of the original project. Easier to do it right in the first time as opposed to having to do remediation. But it is kind of something that management often doesn't really fully think about. And it's not unique to SMX. It's not unique to Oracle. It's not unique, it's just not unique. It's just the way the world works. So if you want to have a conversation about that, and the best time to have a conversation is as you're scoping a project. And certainly, we could bring in Tom and Lee to talk through the pros and cons of doing what needs to be done and how that impacts the project. I think that's what you get from us two firms as a team, is how do we, get to the right result for the client with the right scope and understanding the resources that would be needed. So if you're in the process of scoping a project, or maybe you've got a project already bid at this point or awarded and you're in the middle of it, and you're like, we didn't realize we're not gonna, have a SOX compliant environment, or maybe not 100%, but some of the requirements you're handling, we can come in, and even if it's not as part of like managing or changing that project, we can put a plan in place to get you to that as soon as possible, without necessarily threatening your current scope. So I just wanted to throw that in. It's not unique to you guys, Tom, and how you guys approach projects. A lot of conversations with Workday SIs, large SIs in that space, and we see the exact kind of same challenges in terms of maybe some of the lack of scope. Back to the regular schedule program.
So, right. So what we have here in this slide is really just, the main drivers of success, right? And again, you can get 20 different consultants that give you a presentation on this, and you will probably get 20 different answers, and they are all correct. It's just a matter of what you see very often. And I will tell you that the three things that I have on screen are probably the three biggest ones during the project that you just don't see people focus on. Number one is project buy-in. And some of that relates to organizational change management. Organizational change management covers a lot of different things. And I will tell you, as an old school implementer, I used to kind of think organizational change management was a big word for let's figure out a way to bill you another $1 million. I will tell you, however, especially as the more I've worked in the public sector and with not-for-profits, it is super important, if nothing else, to do a stakeholder analysis and understand who your champions are, who are your advocates, and who are the folks that do not want the change, and understand how to talk to those people is extremely important. I saw a lot of posts on LinkedIn recently about ERP projects that were sabotaged. And I know that sounds like a strong word, but I've seen it firsthand. We have a number of engagements currently going on where we've got customers that they simply do not want the project to be successful for a variety of reasons. So getting your people to buy into the project early on, and what that means, and really a way to do that, and this is something that my firm does. I think most firms do this, but you really need to have a project management plan at the beginning of the project that not only dictates how you're going to execute the project, but also how you're going to measure success. So when you're done the project, right, whether you're done a phase or done a wave, how are you going to measure success? Is it, all your requirements are done? That's great. But if you have all your requirements met, but you don't have buy-in, people aren't using it, you've got a very expensive system that people are not going to like anyway. So really make sure you document that and figure out ways to get people to buy in. And we can talk through some more of these later. The second thing is data conversion. And that really falls early and often. It's funny that Jeff mentioned Workday. I'm not going to pick on them specifically, but I did, I've seen a lot of projects where we're bidding or competing against Workday, and what those folks bid is usually different from what the expectations are. And a lot of other firms do that as well. And, whether you, the customer, are responsible for data conversion, or the SI is responsible for data conversion, or it's a marriage, make sure you take it into account and you understand what you're going to convert. I have a tried and true trope that I go by, and I've been using it for years, and I firmly believe it, which is unless you have to convert, or excuse me, unless you have to transact on it, whatever it is, the cost of converting it is usually not worth the trouble. Unless you have a staggering amount of documentation on how you mapped your legacy to your converted data, it is next to impossible to audit converted data. It's going under way too much transformation. Plus, it was not your system of record. So typically speaking, when we get audit requests, that have to come from the legacy environment in the format as it was presented when it was the system of record. So, bear that in mind. Data conversion is super important. Don't take it lightly. Even GL, which I'm an ERP guy, but what people can see and how people can see it, make sure you get it and understand it early. And then the third one, ERP can also mean HCM. So a lot of times when we do these responses, we see requests for ERP systems, and under ERP, that blanket term, we see HCM, or we certainly see payroll. And this is a bugaboo of mine, as a lot of things seem to be, but you got to make sure you get the accounting right. And this one is really challenging. We talked about this a little bit on the last session that we did, and this is not meant to be a criticism of clients or consultants or anything else, but even if you guys, even if you hire a big four accounting firm like Deloitte or Accenture or KPMG, whoever it happens to be, they are not there as your accountants, right? And for the most part, it's not in most folks' scope. I know it's never in my scope to give you accounting advice, right? So our job as ERP consultants is to get the accounting from you, the customer, and make the system do it. And the reason I kind of highlight that, the amount of folks that I work with that are controllers, and they are heads of accounting departments, and I ask them, are we doing standard accrual or are we doing modified accrual? And they look at me like I got 5 heads, and they don't know the difference. How you get to be a controller or an accounting director and not know the difference is a little shocking, but you have to make sure you get it right. You have to make sure you see it. And you really have to make sure that you have it documented and you have agreed upon for each transaction what's the expected journal entry, and make sure you get it. And I'll say, again, we talked about this last time. Lee, I'll give you a chance to comment in a second, but especially with the Oracle projects, there's a lot of clearing accounts that are used in Oracle projects for all the right reasons. But you have to know how those clearing accounts are going to get cleared out, right? So I'm going to debit, salary clearing or credit salary clearing when I'm doing an OTL transaction, and it's going to get cleared out when we book the payroll journal entry, or whatever it happens to be. But making sure you walk through those transactions and walk through them effectively is, could not be more important. And the last thing before I let Lee comment is shameless plug. Lee and I both have a web series we call Afternoon with Aces. We did 12 sessions last year over 8 months. And we will be starting that series again in November 25, and it will run until April of 2026. Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
No problem, Tom. So to that third point we have there, what we're looking at here. Even if you're not doing an ERP implementation, Tom and I speak about ERP all the time. Again, he's an accountant. I play an accountant on TV. We kind of do this stuff in the systems. Even if you're doing an HCM implementation only, accounting still has to be involved. One of the things you always have to set up, you have to have a ledger set up. Have to. So you have to have a chart of accounts. Even if it's a bare minimum chart of accounts, I've got my segment, whatever segments, and a single value in each. It has to be set up. And if you set that up wrong, and you complete your HR implementation, say now we're going to go to ERP, you're in a world of hurt. You have to be aware of the interdependencies that we have out there. And as we start talking about the kind of approaches for implementations, Big Bang, doing phased approach, doing waterfall, all that kind of thing, as an implementing partner, you have to have that stuff to take into account. Even if I'm starting HR now, and financials is going to start in June next year, Financials still have to be involved at the beginning. They have to help design all that kind of thing, just so everyone is aware of the issues that we may encounter 7 months down the line, that you wouldn't have found out if the ERP team had got involved later. As for the data conversion part, I just wanted to come back to that. To Tom's point, and he's absolutely right. And unless you have got really compelling reasons to bring that data across, try and leave it out. You have to remember, whoever is converting that data is going to convert it. It's still at the end of the day on you, the client, to try and reconcile all that, to make sure it all ties. You've got 1,000 records in there for $1 million. That's the easy one. But you've got to go through everything and say, yes, that if those 1,000 records for $1 million, I do have the right 300 customers, 300 suppliers out there for whatever, and the amounts are all correct, and the accounting is all correct. Even if I'm going to get rid of the accounting still has to get correct, because you might have to reverse some of that stuff out at some point with a credit memo, with a refund, with whatever. So you can do whatever you want within the system. Just bear in mind that from the reconciliation point of view, that has to get done as well. Sorry, Tom, that was my little rant. Go ahead.
No, it's all good stuff. And I guess one additional point that's not necessarily on here, but I liken it to being a patient in a hospital. You really have to be your own advocate. And what I mean by that is no matter who you engage with, whether it's Creel or ERP Risk Advisors or even Oracle, you really need to vet the things that you're told. A lot of people, a lot of answers that you get, it's just the way Oracle works, and a lot of times that's true. But really, if somebody's telling you something and it doesn't seem right, be your own advocate, do a little research, maybe get some outside help, and just validate it. Lee and I are doing a couple IVV, which stands for Independent Validation and Verification projects now, where we're being asked to validate things that the SI is saying to the customer that it's correct and it's true, and a lot of things that they're getting are correct. They might not like, the customer might not like the answer, but they're right. But we've certainly found situations where things that they were told were not correct, right? And again, nobody does that. I firmly believe that nobody does that intentionally, right? When I was my old boss always used to say, when you have to choose between malfeasance and incompetence, always assume incompetence. So I don't think people do things like that on purpose, but you really do have to be your own advocate and make sure you're asking good questions. And another way you do that is you document your objectives and what you're trying to do at the start of the project, and that really ties back to the project tie-in. So
yeah, if I can jump in here,
go ahead, Lee.
quick, Tom.
I'm sorry, Jay. Sorry,
on the data conversion side, you mentioned certain data being converted, and then obviously that effectively means that the legacy system, whether it's still being used or being decommissioned, somebody needs to think about the impact of how to keep that data and make sure it's available for audit and other compliance purposes. So how often do you see that coming into scope from your perspective as part of the SI role, putting that kind of a custom archive process versus the client taking that in internally, and then any I guess comments on the different strategies?
Not as often as I would like, Jeff, I would tell you. So unfortunately, it usually is forgotten, or it's added very late on the projects where the client has the wherewithal, the intelligence, or the budget to do it, and they do it early. It can work quite well. And what we typically advocate for, Jeff, is you take your legacy data, and I'm going to say you kind of bring it over as is in whatever structure it has, okay? And then what we will typically do is I'll have my guys, I'm going to denormalize it. Essentially, we transform it into what it would need to look like in Oracle. And the same logic that you use to map transactions for conversion, you can use to map and create, either materialized views or object storage in enterprise analytics, so that you can unify the legacy data with the new data that you load into Oracle Cloud, and you can get historical reporting alongside your new reporting, so you can get trend analysis. And I'm not going to get too much deeper into that, but it's really important to do. Not enough folks do it. And I will tell you, my opinion, that is absolutely the best strategy. It 100% is the best strategy. and you can get your reports, you can get your things out of it, but you're not spending $1 million to load, transactions from 20 years ago.
So are those being stored in the kind of the core base tables, or are those stored in like a custom schema?
What we typically will do is we'll
both?
bring them over into a database, a SQL database, or usually we prefer an Oracle database, exactly as they existed. So you do a database export or a full table export of the legacy tables that you want to bring over exactly as they were, so that if they wanted to write legacy reports against them, they could. And then in that same database, Jeff, we would create a view to unify and modify the objects so it's similar to the way you report in Oracle. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, that's great. That's helpful.
Okay.
All right.
And the benefits, I'm sorry, Jeff, the benefits you have for that, right? So if let's just take payables because it's the easy one. I've got, a gazillion years of history for suppliers and invoices and payments and maybe voids and cancellations and all that stuff. If you're looking to convert all that stuff, do a true conversion, I'd need to get all those suppliers, get them into the system with the same supplier numbers. Okay, that's easy enough. I can get the invoices in. Well, the accounting could have changed. I could have closed out accounts. Okay, I can get on board with that. But then you have payments. I've got no way of bringing in a payment and inserting. I have to kind of create payments out there, or I just use all this stuff in the table and just mimic what it would look like with the original data. Then a lot of that issue has gone away because you don't have to have that manual processing out there as well. So that's really what you're looking at. What's going to hinder me from converting this and going through?
Got it. Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. So the next one here is we got the this is my little attempt to do Who Moved My Cheese, right? So that was of course a big book on change management that was released in the 90s, early 2000s, and it's super important to take into account that what an ERP system is going to do. It is going to change your process. If it's done right, it's not only just a change into the way the data is entered into your system. It really should be a fundamental change in how people interact with the system and how people do their jobs and their processes, right? And that really, again, is part of change management. And most SIs, myself included, I'm not an expert on change management. Now, I have people on my team that are, and we got a number of people that do change management for large implementations, and they're really good at it. And those folks are super important to keep engaged. But as you do that, you want to make sure that you're taking things into account, and really discuss with people, have conversations, and make sure that they are up to speed on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And a follow up to that is, it's funny, I vacillate on this a lot, which is training. And I'll tell you, I've done it a million different ways, and no matter which way I do it, I'm always thinking I should have done it a different way. What I try to do during my implementations is we try to get people involved early and often in the programs so that they're trained throughout the cycle. And that's good because you get people in the system earlier, and you can test if it's done right, you can increase user adoption. But unfortunately, what I see quite often is when you ask people to do homework or ask people to follow up, they either don't do it, or by the time they actually have to use the system, they forget what you showed them. So you want to have to do it again. So I'd be curious, Jeff or Lee, if you got some thoughts on that. But I don't know that there's a single magic bullet answer. But I do think exposing people to the jobs and the system and how their processes are going to change is super. Lee, I just see there's a question out there. Let me just look at that question real sid.
Okay. Can I let me give my opinion first while you're doing questions?
You got it. Yep.
So 100% agree with you. I want people in the system, in a system on day one. What we do on the vast majority of our projects, we do what we call process familiarization training literally on day one. So day one is kickoff meeting, rah, rah, rah. We're going to, put in a new ERP system. This is what we're going to do. Afternoon of day one, I have people in a system. I'm showing them entering a supplier, entering an AP invoice. It always comes back to payables, just for the people who've listened for the first time. It will always be financial stuff that we have on there. But I want them in the system. I want them to already be exposed to that. What I've seen on implementations that have gone awry is where the implementer is doing everything on the system, and the first time a client has seen anything outside the sales cycle is, and here's conference room pilot one, playback, process playback one, whatever it is, this is what it's going to be, where people haven't had a hand on keyboard, haven't seen a system. It does not bode well. The other part you have is, as soon as you get them in the system, you start introducing them to, this is the functionality, look at this, it's out there. We've got clients we've moved over from green screen stuff. Just having those people being in a new system that is up to date and modern and not 30 years old is a big change. And getting that change impact on day one, and okay, I see how to do this. And for some people, literally, it pains me to say, and this is how you use a mouse to get over there. Going through that process and introducing them early is great. So they start getting through the process. And when they get to conference room pilot one, process playback one, it's like, okay, I know an AP invoice. Let me see what you're doing differently here on an AP invoice. Oh, we need to do approvals. We need to do something or other. Great. But I've already got that foundational knowledge. I've already been introduced to it. And therefore, I'm taking this earlier. To Tom's point, homework, we always try to give out homework. We always say we're going to check up on it. I know people have got real jobs. I want them to do the homework, and the more successful implementations, folks have done homework. The more people are in the system, tends to see the more successful a project is. Jeff, anything to weigh in on there? Or Tom, do you have enough for your question?
I do. Yep. Jeff, you got something to weigh in on that, or any questions or comments, folks?
No, I think you guys covered it pretty well.
So the question was, as Tom said, convert legacy data only if you not can transact it, but if you will, or is that AP example, or is it something different? It's actually it's slightly different. So Lee was talking about AP payments and the ability to convert them. There is an open API that you can use to convert legacy payments, so it's certainly there. Again, generally speaking, if you, whoever you are, tell me that you want to convert last year's closed AP invoices, even though they're already paid, because you want to make sure you don't get a duplicate invoice, you could convince me of that relatively quickly. I get the need for it, and I'd have to go in and look in a historical data warehouse, wherever it is, for an invoice number to make sure it wasn't paid is somewhat problematic. You just have to be cognizant that if you do that, to convert it with 100% accuracy, so that the chart of accounts where you charge it to is exactly the same, and everything's exactly the same. It opens up, everything in Oracle is related, right? So if you're converting, AP invoices, you could conceivably have to convert the POs that relate to them. If you're going to do that, you could conceivably have to convert the closed projects that relate to those, which means you might have to convert the employees that have long since left. So you really have to go through and think of that, and just determine if the benefits outweigh the costs when you're going through those conversations. Again, so it gets back to what cost benefits and what you got to do. So we're going to the next point, which is focusing on small wins. I said I'm a real believer in this, right? How to get to the desired endpoint. So I've got a slide here we use quite a bit, whether you want to use Big Bang or a phased approach, and depending upon the project and whom I'm working with and what I'm trying to do, my approach differs quite frequently. So for some customers, I advocate for Big Bang. If they're putting in a large footprint, but they don't have a large employee base, just rip the Band-Aid off and get it done as quickly as possible. But for some other folks, they might not have to do it, and phase might be better. And again, I saw a post on LinkedIn a few weeks back, and I had a back and forth with the gentleman, which is stupid. Arguing on the internet is just silly, but whatever. He was advocating, get it done as quickly as possible, and it's the best approach in the world. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think it depends upon your user base. If you've got an advanced user base that can devote the time needed to get on the system and understand how it's going to work, then certainly get it done as quickly as possible. But if you've got a large and diverse workforce, what we mean by diverse is you got back office people, you got front office people, people that are in the streets, or people that are doing things that are not necessarily in front of the keyboard all the time, but they have to interact enough to do their jobs. Those folks, it's going to be very difficult to get them trained quickly, and having a slow rollout may be more beneficial. So, I guess what I'm trying to get to is how to focus on the small wins, and whether you're doing big bang or phased, getting people on the system, getting your requirements done, understanding what your organizational goals are, documenting them and getting agreement. Those are small wins, but they also show tremendous value. And something else that I've been doing recently for a small win, and it's only applicable for ERP implementations, but we've proposed that you can go live on the general ledger relatively quickly if you can get your GL balances mapped and mapped consistently, that you feel confident with them. A good way to show value is, have your legacy transactions account in your system and post a GL, and then you can bring those journals into Oracle GL and use Oracle GL to do your adjusting entries or your consolidation entries, and use Oracle to do your reporting. That is a relatively straightforward approach. It doesn't get you a ton of value, but if you've got reporting issues and you've got an aging system that you're worried about being able to get financial statements out, it's a very reasonable approach. And it's also a good way to ingrain some of your team with the benefits of the solution before you have to wait for all the other projects. So, you got to be creative. You have to partner with a firm that's willing to be creative with you, and come up with different ways that you can kind of get people in. But it really does, focus on partnership. And the name of this series is Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And you could be having a great implementation, which is awesome, in which case you're not having troubled waters. But if you're having a challenged implementation, there's a lot of reasons for that. Could be the SI. It could very well be you. I will tell you my experiences is with most things in life. Blame is usually appropriately spread out evenly. There is no one without sin. So it's very difficult to cast the first stone. And you want a partner that isn't looking to necessarily cast aspersions or cast blame. You really want to work with somebody to get a win and get the process moving forward, and having those conversations early and often, and identifying and being creative on things that you can put in and bring forward is a great way to do that. Lee and Jeff, any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Lee. I got a few comments. I want to shift topics. Go ahead, Lee, though.
All right, so yeah, a lot of the approach we have here, and we've got another slide looking at the pros of the phased approach. It comes down to, what are you implementing, right? If you're just putting in, and again, coming up with it, just putting in general ledger, then yes, it's easy one way. When you start putting in multiple products, multiple families of products, you really have to see A, who you're implementing, and B, can your organization take on such a vast thing at the same time. The other thing we always try and be cognizant of as we go through this is, people have got real jobs. If you're on the client side, but you are the controller, you are the accounting team, you are the HR people, you can't devote all of your time to putting this stuff in. You've got real jobs to do. You've still got to close the books. You still got to make sure your suppliers get paid. You still need to make sure that people get payroll and benefits and all that kind of thing. So trying to do everything at the same time, pulling out all your senior people to do this kind of thing, can get tough. And that's part of the change management, is seeing how we can do this, and part of the implementation process is seeing what you can do, what you can cover at that point. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to pull it back up at a little bit higher level, and I think what I'm always looking for is, what are the big levers that drive project success? I mean, even like you're going through here, kind of the pros and cons of big bang versus phase. I mean, these are things that you guys, and to me, to some extent, lesser extent, live and breathe and have been for 25 plus years. And most of the time, organizations that are doing implementations, so the senior execs, they don't have a lot of ERP implementation experience. Maybe they've gone through it once or twice in their career. Maybe they haven't at all. And certainly there's a good chunk of the project team that if they're internal resources, they haven't gone through this before. And one of the big levers, I think, especially in the public sector, but even in the commercial sector, I think that organizations should think about is, you mentioned, Tom, the IV&V projects you're doing. Can you explain, take a little sidebar here, what that looks like, what you're doing in those projects, and maybe opine a little bit on, like, if you were a senior executive, would you kind of go it alone, or would you want another firm like SMX coming alongside and making sure that things don't get off the rails, so to speak?
You know, it's easy for me to say because I'm spending other people's money, but I would tell you it's worth it to have an independent party do ride along, right? So on larger projects, right? When I say larger projects, I mean multi-year, multi-phase, multi-pillar implementations, Jeff. We usually recommend that you get an independent party to do the program management. And when I mean the program management, that's somebody that's going to oversee not only the SI, but also you, the client, and act as a person to help drive the work streams and have coordination. You know, my firm certainly does it, and you can certainly, you know, make the justification that having the SI do it is right. My experience is it's better to have an independent party because, you know, they shouldn't play favorites, right? They should be able to call both parties out and ensure that you're doing the right things. What we're doing on the IB&V project, and again, Jeff and I are working on the same project together, is we're reviewing deliverables, which is certainly, I think, somewhat beneficial. But we're really reviewing decisions that are made and just ensuring that they're made not necessarily in a vacuum, but they've got support for them, right? So to do that, you know, we're looking at the requirements, looking at the recommended configurations, and just saying either, you know, A, we agree with them, or B, no, we don't agree with them, and here's why. Right? It's easy to say you can disagree with someone. You know, again, I had a situation, client thinks X and I think Y. But when we do these reviews, it's not necessarily we don't like the work product or we think it should be more. It's we don't like the work product and here's why. Here's where it's lacking. Or here's where, you know, it could be fleshed out more. So if you've got the wherewithal to do that, it tends to go better. And I would tell you it's better to bring those folks in if you're going to do it earlier than later. And another area where, you know, we've done this and it's certainly beneficial, the project that Jeff and I are doing for the IB&V, we're essentially sitting in the middle. The projects that I've done where it's worked the best, we've actually sat on the same side as the customer and been their advocate. And what I mean by that is, you know, most folks haven't done a lot of ERP implementations, right? So when a consultant, you know, comes in and says, oh, we should do a single ledger here as opposed to, you know, multiple ledgers, wherever it happens to be, the customer may not understand what that means. Now, if the SI is doing their job, they should explain that, but it doesn't mean that they will or that they can. So having an expert sit on your side of the table to be able to explain, okay, this is what a ledger is, and you know, at least determine, yeah, that, you know, based on what you're saying, SI, that decision makes sense, or no, it really shouldn't be one ledger, it should be multiple ledgers, or whatever it happens to be. So having somebody with that expertise on your side is often a really good decision, and it can save you a lot of heartache and pain down the line. And I guess the last thing I would say is, to answer your question, Jeff, and this is it's another trope, but it doesn't make it any less true. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. And what I mean by that is if your SI is missing deliverables, you're missing dates, you're missing things, and you really can't get clear answers to why, probably means something is not going well. Either they can't understand your requirements, or they've got a junior team, or they've got a team that just can't configure things in a rapid fashion. It's your right to understand where things are. There's certain things that I harp on pretty hard when I do these projects. Sometimes I get them from my team, sometimes I don't. But an updated project plan, an updated listing of work products that add value. There's a lot of work products that are done that have to be done for various contractual reasons that don't necessarily add value. But a requirements document or process flows or use cases that are really specific to your business, those things are important. And I would tell you, if you're not getting them on a timely manner, raise the flag and raise it early. Jeff, does that kind of address what you were looking for me to achieve?
Yeah. I'll Lee chime in a little bit too if you have any other thoughts.
The only thing I would add to those is, as well as seeing those documents, make sure you have them as well. And that's a really fine line. I'm working with clients now where they had some company with lots of letters in their name do their original implementation. They don't have any of their training documents. They don't have any of their testing documents. They don't have it because it's all on lots of initials, SharePoint site or whatever. They have no access to them. So as important those documents are, make sure make sure you've read them. Make sure at the end of the day you have them. So when it comes to quarterly updates or whatever, you've still got the same test scripts that you guys were using on the first time round to go through there. Very important stuff. Need to make sure you have that. As Tom says, you're referring to those the entire time, and they should be up to date.
I will make one follow-up on that, Jeff, before you chime in, though. And I do see this a lot, and I see it more often than I would care to admit. We get brought in after the fact and like, okay, where's your training documentation? Oh, we never got it. We never got anything. Man, I really find that hard to believe. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard we didn't get a requirements document, or we didn't get a training document, or we didn't get this. And then I go and look on the SharePoint site that you give me access to, and it's right there. It's right there. So, a lot of times, SIs get a bad reputation. Some of it's deserved, but I will tell you, is more times as any, it's the client didn't pay attention, or they didn't actually take the time to look for something before fingers were just pointed. And sorry, customers, I know you're on this, you don't want to hear that, but I do see it quite often. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm Jeff. I'm sorry. One last thing. I'm sorry.
Sure.
The last one out there is, and Tom kind of mentioned before, if something sounds stupid, really check on it. I've had a few clients again, we do implementations, we do what we call rescue implementations, health checks or whatever, where a client has already implemented and either they identify that they've got issues or they just want to see if they've got anything, which is all well and good. Okay, how do you get your financial reports? Let me see your financial reports. Yeah, we dump everything into Excel and we do pivot tables. Why? Well, that's what that's what our implementer told us. Like, really? Like, I get something like, yes, the system can't capture the color paper on the AP invoice. I get that as a response, but really, you can't get financial reporting out of the system that is run by thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. That just feels wrong. It's something you're paying for already. Just as soon as something feels so stupidly wrong, call them out. Google is your best friend. Every time, Google is your best friend. Go, Jeff. All yours.
Yeah, I just think at a high level, knowing like this IBMP project we're working on together, how much value they're getting out of that from your perspective as an SI and our perspective as a security and controls team. And I'm going back to this, most organizations or most people on a project team are only doing this once in their career, maybe a second time, and don't have a full understanding of, the implications, challenges, and all those other things. Even like we're talking about, a big bang or a phased approach. I mean, those are strategic decisions made very early on in the project. And there are hundreds of those micro decisions that are being made, or things that aren't being done, or nobody's following through on the completeness of a given task or whatever. Security design, training documentation, all those type of things. And it really goes back, and I want to re-emphasize having a firm like SMX work on your team on behalf of management with that level of experience and expertise. Like, I don't see how, if I was to do this over again, and I did implement as a client back in the 90s, and it was a eye-opening experience. If I was in management's position and I hadn't had 2 or 3 at least big ERP implementations in place, I would definitely want a firm like SMX to come in and be that guiding light, quality assurance, if you will, working on behalf of management. So there's a lot of, just holding the SI accountable for what is it they signed up for, and are they doing it on time, on budget? And so, and then, I think that's the number one takeaway from my perspective, is on a consistent basis. Management often thinks that they are experienced enough or can figure it out as they go, but basically they're dealing with large SIs that do this for a living, that write contracts and put things in scope. Sometimes not everything's in scope, right? So you're halfway through a project, the project we're working on, we're identifying things, as you guys have with the client, that need to be in scope that weren't in scope. And now, so the question for management is, do you want to add these things into scope? Because yes, I didn't tell you about them. And what's the impact of that to the cost and the schedule of the project? And having a team on the front part of the discussion, even before you sign a final contract with an SI, to go through the scope and make sure it's complete and make sure it's reasonable in terms of allocated hours, I think would be one of the most important things for management as they're scoping a project, and then having that same team work with them throughout the project life cycle to make sure that ultimately they have the right resources internally, but they're holding the SI accountable, since that's the external spend.
Yep. And while I'm thinking of it, if you ever have an SI fall asleep on you at a meeting, you probably should get rid of them. Not a good thing to have happen.
And there are times where they bring on new resources, right? So that's a lot of transition happens during the project, and that's also something that needs to be managed both in the contract and so that person that falling asleep, get them off the project and bring somebody on that's not, right?
100%. So I think the last slide we have is just phasing and sprints are an option. It's some of the modules. I'm not a big phasing guy. I like to get minimal viable product in, but between ERP and HCM does lend itself a little bit better to sprints. Once you get the core product installed, rolling things in. I typically will try to tie benefits and payroll and tying together, but recruiting or self-service or learning management, those are things that really do lend themselves to phasing, right? So just again, be creative, work with your SI, and make sure that you really have a good idea about what you're trying to achieve and what your pain points are. That's one of the first questions I ask when I'm in a cycle. What's your main pain points? If you want to get an ERP system in, but your HCM is really causing a lot of headache, I am firmly of the opinion it's always easier to lead with ERP. If it's not causing the most pain, focus on the things that are causing the most pain. That's also how you definitely get buy-in from your partners. All right, so contact us. So Jeff, myself, and Lee, we will all be out at Open AI World, in Vegas in a few weeks. We are having an event. If you'd like to get a little more information about the event and maybe come to see us in person, please reach out to us. Our emails are below. We're always there. My general rule of thumb is when I go to those events, you get free consulting for the 3 days that I'm there. So for the most part, if I can answer your question, I do it. I've done that for a lot of folks. I've solved a lot of problems in those sessions, and certainly willing to do it for you folks as well. We will be at someplace in the Venetian on Monday night. I forget where we're going to be, but said if anybody wants to reach out to us, there's our email. And with that, we are open up. If there's any additional questions, please go ahead and answer them.
I say the only time that we're not around is for Def Leppard, and let's face it, you don't want to be getting consulting advice when one of the greatest band of the '80s is playing their music.
100%, Lee. 100%. Well, we'll give it another minute or so, and then if we don't have any questions, we can wrap it up.
The Yardbird, Tom. I'll help you out. The Yardbird. That was where the Monday evening will be. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, seeing no questions, I appreciate everybody's attendance. We had a couple good questions, and most folks were attentive during it, so I certainly appreciate that. I will turn it back over to the OETG, and so this webinar will be available online in a few days.
All right. Well, thank you so much for presenting today. Jeff, Lee, Tom, thank you. We really appreciate your partnership with us. To our attendees, thank you for being here, taking the time out of your day to attend, and for some great education. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week and their weekend. And that will conclude the webinar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.